First things first, let's talk about the difference between a selection and a mask. On a surface level, they're kind of the same and serve much of the same purpose. It really depends on what you want to do with something. So, as an example, let's say I want to move a portion of this photo onto this photo. Well, of course, in order to do a portion, I have to indicate to Photoshop what portion that is. So I do that by making a selection. Now I'm going to make a really quick selection using the quick selection tool. Of course, throughout this course, we'll be covering all these different tools and options, but at this point let's just start with this. So all I do is I make my selection and take my move tool, click on it, drag over to the tab for the other window, hold it for a second, and then come over here and click to tell it that I want to add this to this document. And it does, and because I have just certain selections activated when I did it, you'll notice now I have this transparent layer with just the selected pixels that I moved over. So they're still on the other document, of course. This is a way of copying from one document to another. Now, needless to say, as you can imagine, the accuracy of my selection will make a big difference. So let's just see as an example, not that we would ever do this, of course, but let's just pretend for a moment that we missed some crucial pieces of information when we did our drag and drop to copy idea. You can see, obviously, clearly I have a problem, and the problem is the rest of it's not there. So if your selection isn't very good to begin with, there's really nothing you can do about it at this point, short of start over again. So, needless to say, the accuracy of your selection is going to make a big difference. So let's quickly throw that layer away because we certainly don't need it. And just to compare the difference with that and a mask. Well, first of all, let's deselect this, and just for interest's sake, let's take this whole document, no selection, do our same drag and drop routine. And when we do, you see that the whole thing has come in without any hidden areas because we hadn't made a selection. Well, if we now add a layer mask, this is the button down at the bottom that lets us do that, we have this additional piece of information here on the side, you can see, that lets us determine what parts we want to show and what part we want to hide. Well, the basic concept of layer mask is white reveals everything and black hides. So at the moment, because our layer mask is white, this entire layer I dragged over is visible. So if I were to take my paintbrush tool, get a decent sized brush, black is my foreground color, anywhere that I paint, I will be hiding that part of the layer. Now, obviously, as you can well imagine, the accuracy of your painting is going to make a difference. So at a certain point, you need to get smaller brushes and be more accurate and so on. But the main point of this is that the difference between making a selection and making a mask is that a selection can be fairly permanent. When you make a selection and then you do something, it can be fairly permanent, as we saw in that example where I cut off her nose by mistake. Let's use that same example in this point. Let's say as I was doing my masking, I wasn't paying very close attention and I deleted too much. Well, I didn't really delete it, did I? I hid it because of this mask. Let me just actually show you what the mask is looking like. Pretty weird, but it's the black areas that are hiding parts of the layer. So if I want to get the part I just unintentionally deleted back again, I just have to make sure my foreground color is white, and wherever I paint, I will be revealing that part of the layer. So they go very much hand in hand, but ultimately you'll probably want to spend as much time as possible ending up with turning your selection into a mask. I won't be talking about that in more detail later on, but that's just to sort of get us started on the difference between the two. It's a very important difference. Now, let's throw that away once again and switch back to this document just to show you if I had a selection, and let's get it back to being a good selection again. If I unlock my background layer, Option or Alt, double click on it to call it something else, and then click on the Layer Mask button, what will happen is it'll automatically make a mask based on my selection. Now, if I drag and drop this layer over using our same method, because it has a mask already made, you see how nice and close that is, it looks very good, because the mask came with it and the mask was made based on my selection. The beauty of it in this case is, unlike the other example where if my selection wasn't perfect it would be kind of late, here I have lots of opportunity to change my mind because, again, we have this layer mask associated with our layer that we can go back and change it. So as we'll see throughout, we're going to spend the next few lessons talking about the different ways of making a selection, but if you're always kind of thinking of making that selection with the ultimate goal of ending up with some kind of layer mask, that's the important approach to take. Let's look at one other simple example of the whole idea of making a selection to do something with and then turning it into a mask automatically. So here we have a portrait, and I want to change the color of her shirt. Well, if I didn't have anything selected, let's actually, since it's already selected, let's do it first. So let's add a hue saturation adjustment layer. Notice I'm not going to the image menu, I'm going over here to this new adjustments panel in CS4, and now because I had an area selected, I can very easily and effectively change the color of the top that she's wearing. Now, just for comparison's sake, if I had nothing selected and then I decided to add a hue saturation adjustment layer, of course we're going to get a very different result because now we're changing the color of everything. Notice what happened with the real one is it created the layer mask automatically. There's my mask that it created from my selection. So even something as simple as wanting to change the color of something, the better your selection is, then when you go to add an adjustment layer, it'll already make the mask for you and give you a better result. So you can see how closely, how hand in hand that selections and masking go together.